Let's get to Roy Jakobs, who's the CEO of Philips. Roy, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on board. And let me just pick through that first sentence around mitigation that you've made around the tariffs, but also the impact so far. Do you want to just give us a sense of what you've been doing strategically to try and work around these tariffs as it impacts key markets like the US and China?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to be back. I think there are two parts to the story. On one hand, we see healthcare still having strong demand for innovation. So you saw us therefore posting encouraging results in Q1, slightly ahead of what we expected it to be. And as well, we reconfirmed the sales outlook for the year because we see an underlying momentum in orders for healthcare innovations, as well as we saw personal health coming back into innovation growth. So that was positive. Then we had to reflect current realities of tariffs into our results. And in there, indeed, we talk about substantial mitigation. What we're doing to mitigate the impact of tariffs is, on one hand, major supply chain actions that build on the program that we have been implementing to make our supply chain more resilient since the COVID crisis. We have been going through that, in one hand, regionalizing more. For example, now we are 90% localized in China. We also localize more in Europe and in the Americas. And now we need to localize more also into the US. That's one part of the mitigation, supply chain actions. Then we are taking decisive cost actions. We have been driving productivity very hard along the last years, 1.9 billion to date, 800 million program from the year, and we are on track for our productivity this year. So those we take into account to continue to deliver these innovations to our patients.
Roy, help me out with these numbers now around the 250 to 300 million euros in net impact from tariffs, because there was a picture that we knew on Liberation Day. There's the picture we know today in tariffs, and there could be changes ahead as we talk about negotiations. So how fluid are some of the numbers as we head towards the next quarter and coming quarters from here?
So the tariff situation is very fluid. What we took into account is what we know now. So in essence, we have taken the situation as announced on the 2nd of April, but then with the pause currently in effect, assuming that the pause will return, after the pause we will return to the tariffs as we know. So that means that the biggest amount of tariffs are on US-China trade, both sides, the 125 and 145%. You have 10% on the rest of the world. And then we assume that after the 90 days pause, we return to the famous board that was presented with the tariffs for the rest of the world. So that's kind of the scenario that we know now that we assumed as impact, that is kind of the gross impact. And then we have several hundreds of substantial mitigation to offset that assumed impact at this point in time, because probably the uncertainty we'll have is that there will be changes upcoming. So we continue to focus on what we can control, driving sales and orders, as well as taking the decisive mitigation actions. And they also built actually on a multi-year program, because this trend of regionalization and also some localization as now is kind of driven by tariffs as a measure is something we have been seeing, as I said, since actually COVID. So people want to make sure that they can get access to product services from nearby. And that's something that we have been working on already, but we need to accelerate some of those efforts into, in particular, the US.